Welcome to Rerouting Logistics, a brand new podcast by Aspian Search and Selection. I'm John Wilson, the Head of Logistics and Transport Recruitment at Aspian, and in this series we're working in partnership with the former Senior Traffic Commissioner and CEO of Beverley Bell Training Consultancy. Together we're on a mission to raise awareness around some key topics and issues impacting the world of logistics. Some of the key topics we're going to be exploring are young people within the industry, diversity and inclusion, and women within logistics. And in each episode, we will sit down with a key influential figure within the logistics sector to shed a light on the reality of working within the industry. Did you know that in an industry that employs over 3 million people in the UK, that demand for young people is 4.6 times higher than the young people aspiring to be within the sector? Well, today we're going to be breaking down the topic of young people within logistics with Steve Granite. Steve Granite has spent over 28 years working within the industry. He's the Executive Chairman of Abbey Logistics and the founder of Think Logistics. He's done some fantastic work on educating young people within the sector and shedding a light on the reality of the opportunities in the industry. Without further ado, Stephen Beverley, I'll leave you to it.
Good afternoon, Steve, and thank you very much indeed for coming to the Pod Cafe in Liverpool, your hometown. Not so far for you to travel.
Yeah.
It's lovely to talk to you this afternoon. Can I ask you a little bit about where you came from and how you came to be involved in the transport sector?
Yes, so I was at school, 15 in Kirby, and two guys come along, the Lucy family, and they were looking to recruit some future managers for the company. They had a small transport business in Bootle, and they were asking for people who were interested in coming to join them. So myself and a guy called Paul Laverick went along, had an interview.
So what made you actually go along and say, I don't want to work in this sector? What was interesting about it?
So I think it was, I just liked Steve in particular who interviewed me. I just really liked the way he was. He was very entrepreneurial, because I actually had other job offers in much bigger companies, but I just liked the idea of joining this smaller company with a nice family feel to it and the chance to really get thrown in the deep end and learn fast. And that's how it all started really. So that was 1995. Joined the company. He spent probably 6 months training us in different aspects of logistics.
And did Paul Laverick start at the same time?
Paul started the same day. Yeah, we both started the same day. Paul went into different departments when I was in different departments, but I was literally in a cab with a driver for 2 weeks.
Can you drive a truck?
I can drive one forward, just not backward. I can't do this.
Okay.
Yeah, we were in every part of the company, from going out with a driver, cleaning the trucks, finance, transport planning, everything you can think of. And then after a couple of years of kind of doing different roles, they sat us down and said, right, we think, Steve, you'd be best in the finance department. Paul, you'd be best in transport.
You're good with figures and maths.
Yeah, and then that's how kind of like the career kicked off then, yeah.
Fast forward a few years, and what did you do with the company?
Well, when I joined, we employed, I think, about 35 people. And then around 2004, I think it was. So I was only still quite young then at the time.
A mere child.
Yeah, I was only early 20s. Steve said to me, I was a management accountant, so I qualified as a management accountant, and I was getting a bit bored of what I was doing and lack of progression, and sat down with Steve and he said to me, I want to make you finance director, which, at 24 was a bit of a surprise, but it was a massive opportunity. I took it, and then 5 years later he sat me back down and said, I want to make you MD. So he was managing director at the time. The company was doing about 18 million turnover.
And how many people was it employing at that stage?
We were employing about 150.
So who'd grown the business?
It was Steve.
Right.
Steve was the MD.
Okay.
So he'd grown the business, and obviously I was FD, so I was supporting him in terms of making sure the company was well financed and well run. And he decided in 2009 to step aside and said, I think you've got a lot of energy. I think you can diversify the company. At the time, we were just moving bulk liquid transport in the UK. And he said, I want you to grow it and diversify it, and, I'll take a back step. I think at the time his ambition was maybe to sell it a couple of years later. So if he was in the background, it'd be easier for him to sell it. And then because the company started growing so quickly, and we expanded into like general haulage, warehousing, bulk powders, Europe, I think he was enjoying it. He liked the way it was going. So in 2016, we'd grown the company to 45 million of turnover. We employed around 400 people. Steve said then, I'd like to sell my stake. So we looked at selling the whole business, but myself and the management team, we built with Steve a really good business, and Mark as well. And we didn't really want to see it be sold to trade. So we teamed up with an investment company called North Edge in Manchester, North Edge Capital. And they basically bought Steve and his brother, they bought their equity and then incentivised the management team, including myself, with shares in the company to basically grow it for them. So that was 2016. If you fast forward to today, we're doing about 75 to 80 million turnover. We employ 650 people. We don't do general haulage, we divested of that. But we're the UK's largest food tanker business and one of Europe's largest as well.
So what's the secret in terms of how you grew it so quickly? Or don't you want to tell anybody?
Do you know, there's no secret. It's not, there's no like silver bullet. It's just what everyone would say. It's just hard work, determination. There's loads of setbacks. Like when people look at graphs sometimes, and we did it when we were doing the investment case, where you look at a graph and it's just all does this. And Steve said to me at the time, looks so easy, that doesn't it? Every year it just goes like this every year. He said, but if you actually looked at the day where it was just up and down and, setbacks, opportunities, great days, bad days. But we enjoyed it and we loved the ride, and we learned, well, I particularly learned just so much from Abbey, and I learned so much from going into a small family business and getting to see how you receive an order to how you get the cash in the bank. That was the biggest thing for me, was understanding that.
Okay, so you're probably a bit of a rarity in the sector at that time, because it's not known for employing the youngest people in the world. It's not known for having a massively huge female workforce or a diverse workforce.
No.
And I know you've been very instrumental in, effectively setting up Think Logistics. What was your motivation for doing that? And do you think that was a success?
The motivation was twofold, really. So firstly, it was to try and give other people from what the government would class as underprivileged areas the same opportunity that I had and that Paul had. And second was that from an employer point of view, I could see the issue that there was not enough young people in the sector, and that the workforce was aging at a rapid rate, and we wasn't getting the same level of people coming in at the other end.
So I know the story about what you did at your local school, but listeners may not. So just give them the edited highlights of you turning up at the school. Yeah,
so similar to what Steve done in 1995 when he drove to the school, and he said, look, it was his former school, and he said, I'd like to employ a couple of people from the local area to become young managers of the future for Abbey. And at the time, careers advice was literally, it was non-existent. So roll forward to when we started Think Logistics, which was around 2010, 2011. I said, look, Paul and I have done very well out of this program, which was like, we call it a program, but there was no program. It was just you get in the deep end and swim if you can. But it worked really well. So I said, why don't we look at bringing through the next wave of young people into the business? So I emailed me previous school thinking they're going to love this opportunity, telling the story about what happened with Paul and I, and they're going to be made up. Emailed them, about 3 weeks went past, no response. So called them up and said, I've emailed the head teacher. If you could get him to check the email, I think it's a great opportunity. Can you get him to call me back? And then a few weeks passed again, nothing had happened. So we emailed again in case he hadn't had it. Again, nothing. I'm talking like 2 months had passed here. So in the end, I thought, I'll drive down. So I just jumped in the car, drove down to the school. What
was your car, Steve?
Bloody hell, what was it now? 2009. I think it was Mercedes, okay. I think. So I drove down.
So you rock up at your old school in your Mercedes car?
Rocked up, went in reception and I said, like, you know, she said, "Have you got an appointment?" And I said, "No, I've been emailing the headmaster, I haven't had a response. I've called." And when I told her, she was like, "And he's not got back." So when the head teacher, he comes straight out and he invited me in for a coffee and he said, "I'm awful sorry." And he said, "I know in business everything's done by email." He said, "But in school, you know, we don't really check our email." This is going back to 2010. I said, "Well, I have called as well." You know, he said, "I know, but I've got so many calls. I thought it'd be a sales pitch." So I told him what we wanted to do, and then the doors were just like fully open then to like come in, give your presentation, and off you go. I think it's a great opportunity.
And that was the foundation of Think Logistics, wasn't it?
That was the foundation, yeah. So it was.
Are you proud?
Very proud, yeah. Because
I
think. Thanks, Beverley. I think at the time it was an Abbey thing. That's what we were doing, and we were doing it just to give back the same opportunity that Paul and I had to kids in the local area, because we knew that they've got the talent, they've got the desire, they've got the motivation, but they didn't have the business network to get the opportunity.
And they don't know about the sector.
They don't know the sector, yeah. And then we have a company that we've used at the time where we could see lots of older people retiring and not enough young blood coming through. So we thought, this is a programme that's worked, let's replicate it. Spoke to the school and said, let me know how many people would be interested in coming to listen to us for an hour. He came back and said, right, we've got the upper school, you know, it was that year 12 and 13 it'd be, wouldn't it? Both years want to attend, and there's about 60, 70 people who want to listen to it. So we thought, bloody hell. So we spoke to Motor Transport and said, we're going to do this event. Do you want to come along? Because I think it'd be great for other companies to see what we're trying to do with young people. And the idea was to offer one management position. And we were thinking, you know, there might be a few people who want to come for an interview off the back of it. And when we went there, I just started this presentation about logistics and how great it is and all the rest of it. And when I started it, everyone was like switched off, and I was thinking, this is not going down well here. So I just stopped it and I said, can I just ask everybody, do you know what logistics is? And there wasn't one person who knew what logistics meant. One put their hand up and said, is it UPS? Because there was an advert at the time. But no one had a clue what logistics actually meant. So I had to almost just
go back to basics.
Go back to basics, think on my feet and say, okay, let's scrap this presentation. That's not going to work. And we spoke about my career, what I'd done, why I'd chosen Abbey over other companies that I'd been offered to go and work for, and why it was a great decision that I'd made, and why I think that people in the room should take this opportunity with both hands and go for it. So by the end of the session, we said, right, we've got one opportunity. Who would like to come for a site visit? And then after that, we're going to narrow it down. And there was about 50 people put their hand up, and I was just blown away by. I thought, it's not the sector, it's the lack of understanding and awareness of the sector. That's the problem. So we actually ended up employing 2 people from there. Both, one is now an accountant, self-employed. One still works with us now. And it was just a great program again. So it blew me away. And Steve from Motor Transport said to me, "We've got to roll this out, because that's just been such an eye-opener that young people just do not even know what logistics means."
And that's where you've really made a difference in terms of speaking to the people at school in the language they understand and explaining exactly what logistics is.
Yeah.
Because some people call it the invisibility of success. They don't think about the transport sector and how important it is to our society, and to the fact that most things are delivered on a truck.
Yeah.
So now you've slightly stepped away, but if you were in the elevator now, I'll ask the elevator question, and you're going up to the 10th floor and you've got a young 25-year-old in the lift and you've got to sell the sector, floors 1 to 10, what would you say to them?
I'd say it's a highly rewarding sector. You can very quickly go through the ranks if you're good and motivated. It's diverse in terms of opportunity. It can be diverse geographically. You can travel the world with logistics. No matter what career you want to do, you can probably do it in logistics in most cases. And it's never going to go away. Logistics will never, ever go away. Despite what technology comes along, there will always be a need for logistics.
Absolutely. There'll always be a need for law as well, which is why I do transport law.
Yeah.
The two go together.
Yeah.
So you've stepped away a little bit from the logistics sector and you've got another business opportunity now.
Yeah.
What message does that give to those young people who are thinking about logistics? Are you saying, actually, it's not a great career, or are you still saying the same message?
No, I think I'm still involved in logistics, so I'm still exec chair of Abbey. I am involved in another business now outside of logistics, but I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing in this other business if I hadn't gained the experience in logistics of what I did. And the other role that I play involves the logistics and supply chain of that particular manufacturing company. So everything I've learned in logistics is just paying dividends in another sector.
So you're saying the skills are transferable?
Absolutely transferable, yeah.
Okay, should we ask a really serious question
Go
now?
on.
Really important question. Football, rugby or another sport?
It's football for me, all day, yeah.
And which team?
Liverpool, all day.
Excellent, that's the right answer. We can carry on talking. So how do you exercise and relax? Long walk, quick run, jog, or maybe a charity football event?
Probably all three, yeah. So I try and get to the gym most mornings, play charity football on Saturday, which my body isn't thanking me for right now. But I like a long walk as well. I love walking.
And how do people, younger people now, who are trying to impress at work, working all the hours, take time out of their busy day to make sure they do get some headspace and do just break away from the screens and from their work and demanding managers?
I think I always try and go before work, because I think if you've been to the gym or you've been for a long walk or a run, whatever, it's just a bit of thinking time. As you say, it's time away from the desk. I think it gives you energy. Exercise gives you energy.
So do it first thing in the morning?
That's what I do. It's the only way, because once your day starts and you try and go home and do it, it's tough. Yeah.
Okay, a couple of years ago there was quite a lot in the press about driver shortages. And again, we tend only to hear about the sector when it's a bad news story rather than a good news story. You took a keen interest in that, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I think you put your head above the parapet and started to do a number of interviews. What made you put your head above the parapet when others wouldn't? Or didn't want to?
At that particular time, that was when we had the driver shortage, which would follow COVID, then the driver shortage. And I've always been one, right since the early days in Abbey, I've never been one to go lobbying government, because I've always thought, it's number one, it's very slow to lobby government. Number two, they don't tend to act. It might be 200 times you'll get a result. And third, you've got a better chance doing it in your own, getting your own business to fix the issue than you are look to government. So I very, very rarely lobby government. That particular issue for me needed government intervention because it was partly government caused. So if you go back to
how was it partly government caused?
Well, if you cast your mind back to what the issue was, so obviously we had the COVID issue. Mm. A lot of European drivers had to go back home because the jobs had come to an end, or you couldn't travel. The driver instructors, yes, obviously couldn't get in the cabs. Therefore, there was no new drivers coming through. Then there was Brexit, so we couldn't get European drivers into the UK to work, and the government wouldn't class it as being, I can't remember the phrase used to use now, but
it's like essential
worker. It wasn't classed as essential worker. So those things were just absolutely hamstringing our business. It was hamstringing the sector, and without government intervention, it wasn't going to change. So, we came up with lots of ideas about training new drivers, but then there was a back.
Who's we?
Abbey, as a business, okay. We thought, okay, well, we're going to have to look to, if we've lost those drivers, and quite a lot of the older drivers who'd had time off on furlough,
didn't want to come back.
Yeah, they just got used to it, and they thought, I quite enjoy this more relaxed life.
And there's a lot in the press at the moment, isn't there, about the older generation who left in COVID, not just drivers, but everybody across the whole of society is saying, I'm not going back to work. Yeah. So you're saying that the driver shortage was one of the other symptoms of that, or causes? Yeah,
definitely, yeah. So there's all those things going on, and drivers were underpaid, but that wasn't a government issue, that was a market issue. So, for me, that was worthy of challenging government to say, you need to step in, you need to do something, because if we all put pay up, which we did start to do as a sector, and we were willing to take on drivers who had no experience and had to go through a driving test, the blockage we were then getting is
Was the test.
you couldn't get a test. I also had lots of drivers from Europe wanting to come and work in the UK who couldn't. So, you know, that's not a fair immigration policy, because a good immigration policy should bring the people in that the country needs and keep out the ones that they don't, if that's what they're targeting to do. But we were blocking good, qualified, experienced drivers who wanted to work from coming into the country. And they offered that like temporary 3-month visa, which was a nonsense. So at the time when I was asked to basically, I think it was, I attended the Conservative Party conference to raise the issue of, you know, the driver shortage. The minister turned up late. He didn't have a clue about logistics. He openly admitted, and when I started challenging him, and said, I'm going to be honest with you, I've only been in this job 2 weeks, I'm not sure what the answer is. And then I had to go 10 minutes later because he had another appointment. And it was just a farce. And it frustrated me like mad, because I thought, you know, we're trying our hardest in a sector that's so essential to this economy and generates so much money for the government, and businesses can't operate without it, and we're being treated like basically a second-class industry. And that frustrated me. And then...
And a bit of annoyance?
Massive annoyance, yeah. So then when I think it was RHA and the FTA, now Logistics UK, came to me with media opportunities to say, do you want to speak on Sky News? Do you want to speak on BBC? Do you want to go on the radio? I was taking every opportunity to get our message across as a sector, because I was really, really annoyed at the government. Yeah, and any opportunity to and I think it was a fair challenge that we were putting back to them as well. You know, it wasn't, we weren't asking for handouts. We were asking them to get their own house in order and to do something before the whole economy suffered. Because if you know, I know from the other business I'm in, if we can produce as much product as we want, if I can't move it, I can't sell it. So that's how vital logistics is.
And do you think you were successful in your one-man campaign, assisted by the trade associations?
I do think it was, yeah. I think two things really, and this is not me. It was the trade associations who lobbied heavily. Yes, you know, I was doing what I could.
You were supporting the work that they were doing.
That they were doing, but
it's vital work the trade associations do, but you were supporting it.
Yeah, I think the boot camps were a really good outcome. So the government funding the boot camps, paying for the licence acquisition, I think that was a massive step forward. And I have people I know will ring me all the time still saying, how do I get me a licence? I've heard these boot camps. So I know on the ground it works. They did start to get their act in order in terms of instructors and tests.
What do you think about the allegations of the dumbing down of the tests?
At the time when the government was saying it wasn't an issue, that was another thing that really frustrated me, because on the ground, and we were being told that we went on a round table call, a virtual one with Baroness Vere, was it?
Yes.
And that was kind of like, you know, the industry's crying wolf. It's not the first time it's happened. There is no problem with the tests, and that was like just a red rag to a bull, because we were already suffering so bad and really struggling to recruit. And then to hear the disconnect of government, whether it was disconnect or just denial, that was like just such a frustrating time. But in the end, you know, as I say, the boot camps were good. They got their act in order very, very slowly, but they did. And then I think the funding towards Generation Logistics was, you know, almost like the wrap up of Think Logistics for me, because we'd spent all that time on just purely industry funded, 50,000 a year, employing 1 or 2 people to physically go into schools and colleges and give the message out. We always said we need government to back this, which will then trigger the industry to back it. So I think once funding came along for Generation Logistics, it was almost time for us to say, like, that's almost job done now. Let's
and a bit of a sigh of relief.
Hand it over, yeah.
To actually get some real money behind it.
Yeah, some proper funding, yeah.
So if you were asked now to engage with government and say what are the challenges for the transport logistics sector for the next 12 months and next 5 years, what would you say to them? Assuming the minister's got time to talk to you, he's got to move on to his next meeting or her next meeting.
I think the biggest challenge now is going to be alternative fuels.
Okay.
So I think that the sector is at a milestone where it's coming thick and fast. The alternative fuel, the legislations, but even though that is still some years away, big corporates, particularly Abbey's customers, they're not waiting for legislation. They want it now. You know, these are big food, multinational food companies, but it's so difficult to make a decision because the lack of infrastructure, and there's too many options at the moment. And I think government really needs to support one of the alternative fuels to roll out an infrastructure, and then I think that'll just ignite the industry to start moving.
What do you think about autonomous vehicles?
I think they're just never going to happen in the UK. I think the US, Australia, yes, they will, but the UK, can you imagine it?
No, no, I can't. So you talked before about going for an interview with your first employer. If you were going for a job interview now, what advice would your mother give you before you go to that interview?
Good question. Do you know, she'd probably just say to me, just do something that makes you happy. Because I've done things in the past where I've just been totally stressed, and she's just said to me, like, is it really worth it? You know, just be happy. And at the time, you're like, no, it's not. I need to do this. And then as you get older, you think, you know.
That's about your motivation, isn't it? That's about what motivates you. So you presumably work because you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you like it. I mean, if you asked, me what I would say to my son before an interview, I would say, and Philippa will laugh when I say this, pronounce your consonants. Okay? We've asked other people and they've said, be yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
What advice for the interview itself would you give?
For the actual interview?
Or what advice, if you can't answer that question, would you give to somebody young in logistics who's going for their interview?
I'd say show ambition,
okay.
Show motivation, because, school is obviously important, results are important, but personally, and loads of people I ask the same question to say the same thing, that they don't tend to check results. It's more about, if you have a young person in front of you who's got really good ambition, really good motivation, the results are secondary, because you can work on that.
So attitude's so
if someone
important.
comes in with great results but there's just no motivation, no life in it, you're not going to employ them.
Or maybe no common sense, because you can be academically bright.
Yeah, and no common sense. Yeah.
My ex-husband tells me all the time I've got no common sense, but that's another conversation. So if listeners could remember or must remember one thing from this podcast interview with you, what would you ask it to be?
What would I ask it to be? I'd probably ask it to be to share your opportunity. There's, like I did when I got given that opportunity as a young person to go and join a business and be developed. I gave that back, because that for me is the right thing to do. That's my values of, well, I was given it, so give somebody else the same opportunity. Don't just look after yourself and, think about your own career. Bring people along with you and develop them.
Think about others.
Yeah.
Okay. And theatre, cinema, ballet or opera or none?
Definitely cinema, but my daughter's just started ballet, so it may become ballet, not cinema soon.
Well, as long as you're watching it and not necessarily doing it. Okay. Sunday roast with all the trimmings at home, or smashed avocado with poached eggs on toast for brunch at a cafe?
No, definitely Sunday roast.
That doesn't surprise
Definitely.
me at all. Music taste, and which radio station and why?
My music taste is just so random. Like, I could go from the 70s to R&B on my playlist. You just wouldn't want to listen to it.
Well, I don't know. And which radio station? Do you like talk radio or do you like music radio?
No, Capital. I like to just switch off. I find the talk ones, they get you wound up, or the...
We won't tell the producer of this podcast interview because he might not necessarily agree with us. And tell us one thing, Steve, that nobody else knows about you just now.
Nobody else, or just like Noah?
Oh, I like being challenged on the question. The question is that nobody else knows about you, but we could have not a lot. We would allow not a lot. Maybe I should just sort of caution you as your lawyer first.
Yeah. I think it's something that not a lot of people know about me is when I was 20, I think it was 20, I had a telecoms business.
Right.
It was like a part-time business. So when I worked with Abbey,
You had a bit of business on the side.
Yeah, I started a business on the side.
Did Did they know at Abbey?
They didn't at first. It was funny. It was a funny story. And then it just grew and grew. And then I ended up with like an office, 6 staff. I was like doing it before work, after work. And then I ended up selling it. And like the brothers said to me after it, you know, what's happened with the phone business? I was like, I didn't know you knew. They're like, we've known all along, but you were giving us such great deals, we didn't want to upset it, and now you've sold it, what's going to happen now? For 4 years, I hadn't told them.
Why didn't you tell them?
I just thought they'd think it was a distraction, which it did become a distraction. That's why I decided, right, I'm going to stick to logistics. I'm doing well. Yeah, I decided to sell it. So
what's the moral of the story? Be honest.
Be hard working. I learned a lot, you know.
But be honest as well.
Yeah.
Okay, because sometimes people think it's a secret, but it isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or an open secret. Okay. Well, I've asked you lots of questions, and you've been great in your answers and given me lots of full answers. So it's your chance now, Steve. I'm slightly apprehensive about. But I can turn the tables, and if you want to ask me anything, you can ask me, and I'll see whether I answer.
Yeah, okay. I suppose I'd like to know, you had obviously a very senior position as Senior Transport Commissioner for for GB. What drove you? Was it, you know, it's a very powerful job. What motivated you every day to continue doing that role?
My colleague Joan Aitken, who was a TC for Scotland, talked about the invisibility of success. And most people in Great Britain don't even know about traffic commissioners. And it's about keeping the roads safe and just quietly getting on with the job. And that's the motivation. And the real success stories were the ones where an operator would appear before you and they're not compliant. And then at the end of the morning or afternoon public inquiry, they would be compliant.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's about road safety. That was my motivation. The fun was shouting at blokes for a living. But that was my motivation, really. With power comes responsibility. And in our office, in the Senior Traffic Commissioner's office, we used to have sayings on the wall. And I think one of them is from Spider-Man, isn't it? With great power comes great responsibility, something like that. So it was a really responsible job, but it was good fun. But 17 years was quite long enough, but for the sector as well as for me.
Well, that was my next question actually. So do you regret not going into your consultancy sooner, or
No.
are you happy with the way it's worked out?
No, I mean 17 years say is quite long enough. And when I retired, I was only 57. That will seem really ancient to you, but when you get to 57, you'll think it's really young. And I knew that I'd still got lots to do.
Yeah.
I never thought the consultancy business would grow as it has, and I do enjoy it. And I was a solicitor before, so it's the same job, but from a slightly different perspective. And what I like about the consultancy work is building relationships with clients. It's the same with you. You build relationships with your customers, whether it's in Abbey or it's in applied nutrition. Yeah. And I like building those relationships with clients. Yeah. And in a way, I'm still doing the same job, because you're just putting them back on the road to compliance. But I don't shout at them.
Yeah, don't get to shout.
Don't get to shout at them, no.
Well, you still do.
Oh, no! You can say that, I can't.
And then one final question. So I know you got involved in Think Logistics with myself, the trade associations, which made a really good impact. What made you want to get involved in helping bring young people into the sector? Because
it's the right thing to do. Yeah. And because the transport sector is so perceived as male, pale, stale. Yeah. It isn't at all, but it's perceived as being that way. And unless people like you, who are good role models, and the Bethany Windsors of this world go out there and engage, it's never going to change. They don't want to listen to old people. You know, they want to listen to young people. And so that for me was really the motivation. Because if we don't get them in, then what we're going to do? Yeah, I agree. Well, Steve, thank you very much indeed. You're welcome. It's been lovely to talk to you, and thank you very much for your time. You're welcome. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks both Steve and Beverley for some really good insight into information. I think it's a really important topic about how we educate young people about the potential career path within the logistics industry. So without further ado, I'll start again. I was going into my other one I rehearsed.
Not too quick, John.
Okay.
You take a good picture, George.
You ready to go? Or?
Yeah, 3, 2.
Perfect. Thank you both, Steve and Beverley. We've got some really good insight information about really important topics in the industry of how we educate and show different potential career paths of how to get young people into the industry. So if you want to hear more from Aspie and Beverley or Steve, or interested in the work we do, follow us on our socials, which is LinkedIn, Instagram, or our website, or give our team a call on 0151 209 2050. So thanks for listening to Rerouting Logistics. And just before you go, if you're listening to this on Spotify, don't forget to follow, save, and click the notification bell. Or if you're watching or listening on YouTube, subscribe below and leave us a comment. Thank you.